of junk.
Welcome to this edition of Trash Compactor. In this episode I'll be making a Mongo Beefhead Tribesman. The Mongo Beefhead Tribesman was part of a range of figures to extend the line after Return of the Jedi had finished, and they tended to grab some bits and kit bash, coming up with a Mongo Beefhead Tribesman. So for this build I'm going to be using a beta hammerhead that I've got. He is in a really poor state. His body's split, there's damage to his arms. His limbs are very loose. The only thing that's probably not loose is his legs, but everything else is absolutely trashed. So I'm going to be using these parts. The other figure I've got is a squid face, and he's not too in bad condition. The only thing is I've got about 20 of these things. Pop and boil. The head I'll definitely use somewhere else, whether I'll put him on an X-Wing pilot's body or another figure, make him into a Hammerhead Jedi. Not quite sure yet, but he'll definitely come in handy in the future. So the body's had some time to sit in the hot water. As you can see, there's the damage on the arm, it's pretty horrendous. So just using a pair of pliers, I'm just literally going to pop the arm straight out. Remember, if you do get some resistance, put it back in the water. And the body and the legs will come in handy somewhere else, I'm sure. So my squid head has been sitting in the hot water for a while, and I need to take the arms off and the head. I need to get the hammerhead arms into the squid head body. Again, this isn't always easy. Tried to see if I could pop them in hot water and then squeeze them in, but they just won't go in. So what I'm going to need to do is trim them down. So just taking a little bit off each disc at the front and the back, that'll allow it to go into the body, and then I can force the rest in with my sculpting tool. It's always easy to get the arms out, always a nightmare to try and get them back in. So doing the same with the other arm. Once it's nearly in, just twist the arm and eventually it'll pop into the socket. If the arm is a little bit loose, I'll use some liquid poly later on just to tighten the joint up and make the arm more stable. And they see, got both arms in, they both turn okay. They're a little bit loose, but again a little bit of liquid poly later on will sort that out. So the next thing I need to do is get the head ready. So I've taken the head off the squid face figure. What I need to do is drill a hole into the base to create the new socket. But the problem with the head is it's got eyes on the back and there is an unsightly hole at the front. On the original concept drawings they just seem to fill the hole and paint over it. But I believe that if it had been made into an actual figure, there is some kind of brain shape at the top, or even a kind of Venus flytrap mouth. So what I'm going to do is, using Milli Putty, is just actually mould the top of the head rather than creating a mouth. I could just leave the hole so it looked very more accurate compared to the Kenner prototype that they made, but it just looks like they've left the hole and painted over it. So a little bit of deviation won't go amiss. So follow your Milli Putty's instructions, taking equal amounts from each side, mixing it up. Once you've mixed your Milli Putty, just a case of rolling it up into a ball. Then I'm going to add this to the head. A little bit of a dome. Start to create the new shape. I want to try and make it seamlessly blend into the head so it looks like it's part of the mould, so I'm just going to put it on and use my Stanley knife to cut some excess away. I think I've got a bit too much on there. So once I think we've got the right amount, next thing to do is just to add some detailing to it. So I'm going to use my sculpting tool, and what I'm actually doing is actually just trying to blend the Milli Putty into the way the shapes that currently run in the head. So I want to try and make it look as smooth and as neat as possible, just using the end of my tool to get some ridges and effects on it. Also, to help smooth it down, just to make it blend in, wet your finger on your Milli Putty, and that really does help. Spread it around. I think that's starting to blend in now, start to look as if it's part of the original head. So using my pointed tool, I'm just going to scrape some away, trying to get it to blend into the edges. so it doesn't look like a perfect dome. So the next thing I want to do is add some very fine detail so it doesn't look perfectly smooth. And adding some dotted detail to match the original squid head pattern. And then I'm just adding some dented detail to give it almost like a texture to match the squid head skin. So as I dent the surface and then just gently tap over it just to smooth it down and make it blend in so it doesn't look perfectly smooth. So once all the detailing's done, I can then turn my attention to the back of the head. Where the eyes sit look a bit weird just to paint over them, so what I'm going to do is, using a bit of Milli Putty on one of my sculpting tools, is actually just take a bit of the Milli Putty and use that to fill in where the eyes are at the back to smooth it out. And just blending that in so it looks like it's solid. Just touching up some final details, and then what I need to do is leave that to dry overnight. So that's my head done. Also going to take advantage of using the Milli Putty to fill in the damage to the arm that came off the original hammerhead, as it's quite a serious dent that is in the top of the left arm. So again with my sculpting tool, literally just going to get that and cram that into the cracks and breaks in the plastic, smooth it down, and it'll just get painted later when I paint the rest of the figure. Smooth it down with a bit of water. So that's as much as I can do on the head and the arm at the moment. It's just a case of leaving that to dry overnight. So they've both had some time to dry now. Head is perfectly dry. So what I need to do is figure out where the head is going to attach to the neck. So at the base of the head I need to flatten off part of the lump to create where the neck is going to join the body. Using my Stanley knife, I'm just going to trim away some of this bump and try and level the head off. This will give me a flat area to drill into. So I think it's about in the right position. I just need to make some slight adjustments to make sure that I get the head level so it's not hanging forward too much. And then using my Dremel, I'm just going to start to gently drill into the head. Just to create a little bit of a dent, give me a centre point to then use my little drill. So now I've got my mark on the base of the head, I've got where I need to drill in so I can make sure I've got it even, and I'm just going to go very, very slowly into the head with a small drill bit first, remembering the head is hollow, so you've got to be very careful because you can go all the way through quite easily. And gently just putting my drill bit in, taking a little bit away at a time, moving it around just to create a little bit of a wider hole. Again, being very careful not to go all the way through. I think I'm starting to get the shape of the hole the right size. Because there is a natural cavity on the inside, when it does clip on, it does stay. So you don't need to make it too big. And then once the head goes onto the body, it's not going anywhere. So my arms are a little bit loose, but I will sort that out with liquid poly. So I'm quite generous with the liquid poly when it comes to the joint, because what I want to do is cause the plastic just to start to swell and start to bond and melt a little bit so it fits more into the shape and creates more of a secure fitting in the figure. But again, don't want to leave it, because if I leave it, it will bond permanently and it'll end up not being able to move. So when you do this, make sure you do move it every 5 or 10 minutes. Within half an hour to 45 minutes it'll probably have dried enough. Let's give the arms a twist to make sure the liquid poly impregnates the inside of the figure, and then I'll just keep coming back to that over the next hour. So the arms have had some time to settle in. I've moved them around 3 or 4 times. They're all good now, they hold themselves up when you move them. Next thing to do is take the head off, because I'm going to paint the figure. So the paints I'm going to be using for this is going to be a chocolate brown, which is an ideal colour, and I'm going to add a little bit of yellow just to give it a bit of a warmer colour. Also adding a little bit of flesh tone, just to help lighten the brown so it's not so dark and so rich. And gently mix those paints together. I'm also going to add some of the orange red to warm it up, some more yellow, a bit more orange, and that will help create the colour I need to match the arms, as I want the head to be a similar brown to the original hammerhead arms. So I've put the head on a end of a paintbrush, and I'm just going to give that a really good coating, making sure I'm getting all the nooks and crannies. And then just to make sure that I don't lose any of the detail, I'm just using a dry brush just to stretch the paint over the figure to make sure I don't hide all of the detail. Once that's done, leave it to the side to dry. Now the next thing to do is to work on the body. So on the natural squid face figure, you've got the neck piece, which is a different colour, and depending on what kind of Mongo Beefhead Tribesman, some people paint it, some people don't. So I've decided I'm going to paint it to match the head, so it looks like the neck and the arms and the chest all blend together. So first of all, give the arms a good cover, and then the next thing to do is the chest up to the neck, making sure I get round the back so the head looks like it blends into the body rather than being two separate pieces. You could leave this the original colour if you want, so it looked like you had a neck piece on, but personal preference. So I've given that time to dry off, so the arms, the head and the neck have all dried off now. Pop the head back on the body just to see what it looks like, and the next thing I need to do is work out where to put the eyes. So the way I'm going to do this is I've actually got a very thin plastic weapon from a modern figure, and what I'm going to do is actually trim a very fine thin disc, and then use this disc to create the eyes. The reason why I'm doing this is I want to be able to glue the eyes onto the figure and then paint them, and the idea is the paint will not go any further beyond the edge of where the eyes are stuck on, so it's almost like they become part of the mould rather than actually painting onto the head itself. I think it just looks more effective. So the thing to do with these is just to make sure that you glue them on and that they're equal and level. So I've got my very thin black discs now to form the eyes. Just need to make sure they're both flat and pointing in the same direction, so he's not going to look boz-eyed in the light. So stuck his eyes on, just going to leave them to dry. So now the eyes are dried, I'm going to paint them both with a bit of black gloss, so I can be quite generous with this and paint this onto the disc. The paint won't actually run off the edges, but I can be quite liberal and create some little bubbles, so it's little bobbled eyes. I think this just gives a better looking eyeball than painting actually onto the head itself. So I need to leave them to dry off. And once they're dried, I'm going to get a little bit of white onto a very fine brush and just stick a couple of tiny little white eye holes. Make sure they're both even. So he's painted, I could leave him like that, but what I'm actually going to do is paint his tunic as well, just so his tunic is a different colour from his trousers. So using some white paint and a little bit of brown, I'm going to give his body, his hips and his back a coat, so it just stands out from the trousers and looks a little bit different. You could paint the boots if you wanted to, but I'm not going to bother. And then it's just some final touch-ups on his arms and leave him to dry off. So my figure's had some time to dry off. I've got some various modern accessories that came with modern figures, the ones where you buy the Rogue One figures and they've got a weapon that shoots. So I don't use those, so I'm going to cut these up and make them into weapons for my Mongo Beefhead Tribesman. The final touch as well is also to get the Zuckuss armour piece that goes over the Zuckuss character. The Kenner prototype trimmed off the bottom of the chest plate. I don't want to do that because there's nothing wrong with it, and it would be a tragedy to chop up a perfectly good accessory. So I'm going to settle for using it as it is. I think my Zuckuss jacket has been used on another figure somewhere else and is intact. So rather than cutting the bit off below the two pockets on the chest plate, I'm going to leave it as it is because perfectly fine as an accessory. And then I've got lots of different accessories that I've painted grey as weapons for my different figures. So there we go, there's my little collection of Mongo Beefhead Tribesman. I hope you've liked this video, and if you did, please subscribe. Interesting fact about the Mongo Beefhead Tribesman: they were originally on the menu in Dex's Diner. Disney later removed them as they thought it was inappropriate that Jedi and people on Coruscant were cannibalising a sentient species, which I suppose makes sense.
What a piece of junk!